The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Today's episode is brought to you by WealthBuilders Membership, a proven step-by-step process that helps you achieve financial security within 2 to 3 years. To find out more, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership. Welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name is Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again. Although we're not happy campers when it comes to football right now, are we?
No, both having sort of on and off seasons, aren't we? Fulham and Newcastle, respectively, yes.
Yeah, mid-table mediocrity, I think, is our combined destinations. However, mid-table and mediocre, it's got nothing to do with our guest today, who is an outstanding individual, very articulate about something he's very passionate about, that it's very easy to fall into a trap of thinking about what he does in the more simplistic way, in terms of design.
Absolutely, yeah. Our guest today is Julian Maurice. He'll definitely be putting a splash of colour onto our black and white kits, won't he? And Julian is a passionate man. He's a very experienced property investor for over 25 years. And in a time when landlords are really looking for every opportunity to squeeze those profits and perhaps putting a different look on things when it comes to design is Julian's expertise area. And we'll learn today that design means a lot more than just the colour of paint on the wall and the colour of your cushions.
Woof, woof. I think he would be having fisticuffs with you if he thought you said that out loud. But anyway, I'm sure he'll speak eloquently for himself, what he has to offer. And I just love creative people, Chris. The sort of creative entrepreneur myself. I seek out creativity. It was Robert Kiyosaki who said, the power of your wealth is determined by the power of your distinctions and your ability to listen and be humble, to listen to other people. And he definitely changed my mind, fundamentally, actually, about property design and how it's so easy to leave that to other people, when in fact, like wealth, you should take full control for yourself.
And a recent conversation that you had between yourselves where that theme of custodianship really resonated with Julian, and you'll hear him refer to that throughout today's conversation.
No, it was interesting because when, I usually have a chat with people to see if they'd be a good fit for the podcast, and immediately could see that. And he was very humble himself when he said, he asked me about what WealthBuilders do more specifically. Obviously, I've been in his ecosystem for a while and we've been connected for a while, but we've never really had a decent conversation. And we had about an hour together. We kind of identified, and I think he mentions it, we're both creative individuals, but coming from completely different angles. And I'm not sure if I could paraphrase it, but it's almost, you're the first person who's convinced me that pensions can be creative, and I need to look very carefully at that. And let's hope he does do that and follow up. But I think he's a man that takes things very seriously and wants to get the best result, not just for him, not just for his family, but for the end user. And I'm sure you'll be fascinated to listen to what he has to say.
Sure. So let's head on to our conversation today with Julian Maurice. Julian Maurice is an interior designer, educator and property investor who sees design as an act of custodianship rather than decoration. And with over 25 years of experience across lettings, sourcing, refurbishment and asset management, his work sits at the intersection of buildings, behaviour and long-term performance. And specialising in shared and high-use environments such as HMOs, serviced accommodation and build-to-rent, Julian focuses on clarity, durability and commercial intent, believing the true measure of design is not how it photographs, but how it performs years later. And through Icon Living, he trains and advises property professionals to take control of design decisions that quietly shape income and maintenance and legacy. Julian, welcome to Wealth Talk today.
Thank you, Christian. It's a real honour to be here.
And I hope the introduction did you proud there.
Yeah, I think it explains it pretty well.
Fantastic. So Julian, you've said that you'd like our listeners to see design in the same way they are encouraged to see pensions, as something that's too important to leave entirely in other people's hands. And what do you mean by that exactly?
This was triggered by a conversation I had leading up to this podcast with Kevin. And we were talking about, we were totally opposite ends of the spectrum. A designer is a creative person. I think somebody that's into finance and things like that has a totally different mind, but we were both speaking the same language, and the word custodian came up, and I did a wealth analysis of my own recently, and the word custodian came up, and essentially my investments are for my future, for my pension. So it's a product that the intent of the product is the same. It's like a financial fortress, part of a long-term strategy. That was my starting point when I invested my own money into property, which led me to think about design very carefully. I wasn't a practicing designer at the time. I was more a contractor, project manager with teams of contractors, and most of my work was for property investors. And one of the things that I felt was important was to think about longevity when thinking about the design. So when doing the specifications, thinking about materials and products that would be easy to maintain, and make sure that the product was easily maintained and easily renovated over time. It would be what would be the word? Rather than thinking about design as what it looks like, it was thinking about design of how it's supposed to work. And that's both for the user of the product, which in our case is a home, and also thinking about it from the other user of the product, which was me, the investor, and how is it supposed to work for me, and how is it supposed to work for the person living in it. So for me, the other user of the product, it needed to perform over a long period of time. So, performance is renting easily, having happy tenants that pay me every month without aggravation, minimal maintenance and repairs. And if I do have to do maintenance in the future, they're fairly easy to do. And that was the kind of starting brief for myself. When I'd worked for landlords, however, and this is probably why I'm here, that was the last thing on their mind. It was really a very surface level conversation about, just design it so that it's got en suites, or, it's got to be student property. I'm not going to give you any other instructions, and I do want it at a reasonable price, which was one of the reasons why I stopped doing project management, was because I used to do very thorough itemized quotes, fully itemized with a proper spec. And most of the time the client would just take that spec to another builder and go, beat the price. And that was it. So I'd done all that hard work for against myself. So for me, investing my own money, design became very important very early on.
Yeah. And our conversation today applies to residential and commercial investors as well as developers. Yeah.
My experience comes by working on HMOs and working with clients doing commercial finance on HMOs. My only experience with commercial business premises is my brother, who inherited a industrial unit in Brighton many years ago when my mother passed away. And I had a conversation with him very recently saying that he wanted to get rid of it because the tenant had decided to leave. About commercial value he was saying that it's not gone up in value because the rent hasn't increased. So I've been more interested in the domestic product, because in my experience, that's the one that has greater capital growth potential over time. I think the difficulty with domestic is how do you make a profit from it, which is where a lot of landlords invest in HMOs and turn them into commercial products. And this is where design has a huge impact.
And I should add to the list of many things that you've done is a contributor to YPM magazine for 10 years. Is that correct?
Well, I'm actually working on an article for them today. So I do the odd article. I think they come to me when they need some space filling, and I do an article on, they say, what do you want to write about? And I'll do an article, and it's always design related. I do a training course with them. I take a training course where I teach investors how to be design thinkers. So yeah, I do a lot of work with them.
I'm just going to kind of reel off some of the benefits here. So, our listeners know what we're going to be talking about today, how it can impact them. And we're talking about benefits being increases in profit, increasing the commercial value. If we're talking HMOs, the longevity you mentioned, reducing maintenance, turning underperforming products into high performing products, and passing on this aspect of legacy and custodianship, passing on quality products to your children and grandchildren. Would you say those are the key benefits, really?
Is that all? Is that the only benefit?
Maybe
it's like with the Monty Python thing, all we found was this spoon, sir. You're absolutely spot on. I don't really need to add anything to that because I've worked as an estate agent, a letting agent, a sourcing agent. I've invested myself. I've managed myself. And I'll just go to the kids thing because this is relevant to me because I've got 2 boys and I've kind of feel that I would like to be able to pass on what I've got to them. That's where this word custodian comes in. I like to get an income from it, but it would be nice to be able to pass it on to them. Now, if you pass on, in my experience, a lot of properties that are owned by landlords deteriorate quite badly over time. So if you've got a commercial product, if you've got a commercial mortgage on a building, and it starts to deteriorate and it's not managed properly and it starts to lose its luster. The consequences of that it's like a snowball effect. You then only attract a certain type of tenant. That certain type of tenant then doesn't look after the property as well. The property degrades even faster. The landlord then is either faced with 2 options, either a big refurb or selling, or you just let it get worse and worse and worse. And then you've got this, what is that then if not a liability? And what I don't want to do is hand my children liabilities or complex products that they would, because they're not into property. And I would probably ask everyone here, are your children into property in the same way you are, or do they have their own lives? Do they have their own careers? And what would happen if you dumped this asset onto them? There was a total pain in the arse. That's not something I would want to do. I don't want to give them complication. I want to hand them something that is an actual asset. So that had to be thought about when I was thinking about how I was going to invest, what I was going to invest in, and how I was going to design it and create this product. I look at it as a product. It is, to me, I would take the approach, how am I going to design this product so that it is what it should be?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that. The term product, we're referring to the product being the property, not talking about mortgage as a product or anything like that, right?
No, but this is the reason why I call it a product is because when I was looking at designing my own properties, where was my reference point? Who could I go to at the time? And this was 10 years ago. Who could I look at the time who was designing them in the way that I thought they should be designed? Nobody. So I had no one to look at as an example for which I could apply onto my own design. So I thought, well, how the hell do I design this thing to perform in the way that I wanted it to? Because I had not seen anyone do it. It was just paint it magnolia and, put landlord furniture in it and that'll do. And I knew that didn't work. It wouldn't work for but if I'd have had that same product now, wouldn't work. So how do I design this thing? So I looked at product design. I said, if Apple can do it and they can design a phone that today still resembles the original, the design, the user interface is still pretty much the same. How do they think about design? And that's the approach that I took. And so I just instinctively now call it a product.
Yeah. And it's a mindset shift, isn't it? When you change the language like that. So a lot of investors are surprised to hear that properties can quietly become liabilities. You mentioned that. What are the most common design decisions that cause that to happen over the space of sort of 5 to 10 years, would you say?
The lack of them. So they say you don't know what you don't know, unfortunately. I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but I would just ask everyone to just consider for a minute what they're investing in. And I don't even like the word investment anymore. I would propose that what they're actually doing is buying a business. And each property is its own business. You have real people buying this product. Let's forget industrial units because I don't I don't have experience in industrial units. Let's talk about houses. And I would just urge people to think like a business owner rather than like an investor, because my conclusion is it is not an investment. It is a business. It has to be run by somebody. It's not like something you can just put money into and leave it and let it mature. It's a living, breathing thing that gets used, abused, needs maintaining, where the mistake lies. Just to give you an example of this, if you look at, I live near Bradford, and in Bradford, there's a couple of quite large developments there that I know of quite well. One of them is Lister Mills, which was developed by a company called Urban Splash. Those two developments are now approaching the 10, 15 year mark, and they're unsaleable because there's so many maintenance issues causing problems with management that banks won't lend on them. And until they've solved these maintenance issues and management issues, they will be unsaleable. And the reason being is because developers can build stuff well, but they sell them and move on. And then it's up to the people that own them then to pick up all the pieces. This is the thing that I have seen over the years is things aren't built to last anymore. And yet we're talking about legacy. And so this is where I think just a bit of honesty and thinking this is a living, breathing product. And I'm going to be honest with myself here. I want this to be a legacy. It needs to be thought through. It needs time and attention to detail to get it to perform in the way that you want it to perform. And that's really the mistake that is made, is the mindset that it's an investment, not a business. And if you do want a hands-off investment, then what are the chances that someone is going to look after that product as well as you would? And I hear the word leverage, financial freedom, all these things used to sell the product, when that's just the kind of headline words used to attract people onto maybe a training course or a mentorship or something. When in reality, if you have that attitude, you're going to need a huge portfolio to make any money, because a lot of it will be dragging itself down, because through maintenance and through poor build quality. And that's the problem. That is the problem. I just think that it is not as simple as that.
It sounds to me then really it's all about starting with the end in mind, starting early. And would it be fair to say that sometimes you're quite critical of the idea that the architect or builder will sort it, that sort of mindset, right? And you need to be in control, not abdicate that control to an architect, for example.
The assumption is that if you're paying somebody to do a job, they're going to do it right. You don't need to have any kind of responsibility to intervene into the process. It's an assumption that if you tell an architect, I want this house turned into a 6-bedroom ensuite HMO, that it's going to actually be a product that works. Weirdly, I've been the last few jobs that I've had where clients have passed me layout drawings from architects. The moment I've started to populate those drawings with furniture and think about the practical side, how is somebody going to live in this house when there's only one kitchen unit for storage in the whole kitchen and there's no room for a wardrobe in the bedroom because you've made it so small through putting in the ensuite that there's no room to put a wardrobe, or, it just won't fit. Or you've got to climb over the toilet to get in the shower. You'd be amazed at how often I come across these issues. And the plans will get drawn up to pass planning regs. The plans will have lots and lots of cut and paste elements that show building regs, which is very important. Obviously, it has to comply with building regs. It has to pass planning. But then, brutalist 1950s and 60s housing estates, they passed building control, they passed planning, and they became absolute hellhole slums. That's architects. Don't assume that the architect is going to build something or design something that is going to be nice to live in. Then you've got the builders who, with a lack of any instruction, are expected to create this product that you want to be a legacy. When the builder wants to get in, do it as cheap as possible, do it as quick as possible, and get out. I don't know whether you've heard of the production triangle. Okay, well, the production triangle is used by engineers. If you go into, I've seen them in factories where you've got engineers and you'll have this production triangle. And I would ask everyone to just Google the production triangle. And it's a triangle with 3 corners and it's got good, fast and cheap at each corner. Good, fast and cheap. Pick 2, you can't have all 3. That's the production triangle. You can either have it really good quality, you can have it done quickly, but it's not going to be cheap. You can have it done cheap and you can have it done quick, but it's not going to be any good. Quality won't be there. So you've got this builder that's going to be doing it fast and cheap. The only consequence of that is it's not going to be a good quality. And that's who you've got designing your product. And that's who you've got creating the product. Who's responsible at the end of the day when it's built and done for that product? Yeah. So this is why I had to take control of the design process, because I knew that the architect needed looking at. His work needed to be looked at. The builders needed to be instructed on materials. I needed to have a visual because it's a product that needs to sell itself. And so I had to take control of the situation and design it. And then through doing that, I'm now teaching what I've learned and talking about it.
So clearly we're talking more here than just choosing the right color of paint and better staging. We're going deeper. Layout, electrics, schedule of works. Why does this order matter so much?
Let's repeat that. Let's fire that back at you. So we're talking about layout, flow. Why does that matter? Electrics, where to charge your phone? Where are the light fittings? What lighting do you have? That's another question. Schedule of work. So this is basically how to tie down a builder to a price to make sure that he's pricing up the things that you want correctly. Why are they important? So why is flow important? Well, let's take an HMO, for example. An HMO is a house with rooms in it where people that live in those rooms, that room is their home. Not the whole house. The room is their home. So everything you would do in a house, you now have to do in a room. If you design it to just be a bedroom, then it is not fulfilling all of the functions that it's probably going to have to perform. So you need to think about that when you're designing the layout. The kitchen, I just spoke about kitchens. Now, just imagine what a badly designed kitchen is going to look like in 5 years in an HMO that's commercial, which means more than 6 people using a kitchen together. And what that might look like if it's not designed right, or what it might smell like. Now, a smell has been recognized as being a contributor to an aesthetic, to people's enjoyment of, or their experience. Hotels use scent to make the experience nicer. Shops use smell to enhance the customer experience. Just think about how most properties smell in the rental market. So that has an effect on how commercially valuable it is. If you've got a house that stinks of rotting food, where all the corridors, because they've had kitchens fitted in all the bedrooms, have got grease marks all over the flooring because people are dragging food waste around the corridors, and it just reeks of oil, of fried food or microwave curry, then what is it going to be worth to somebody? And certainly as a legacy, what are your kids going to think about this thing you've handed to them? So that's flow, and that's looking at how a kitchen is designed and how waste is managed. So that's just flow. When it comes to electrics, you've got a standard spec for builders in corridors is cool light LED. I call them boob lights. Basically, they're just cheap plastic lights with fluorescent bulbs in them and white light. Bedrooms with inset spotlights all over the place, kitchens with inset spotlights, and that's your lighting. Tenants don't bring in their own lighting. They just rely on what's there. So imagine going to bed and all you've got is either really bright light shining down in your face or nothing. You've got window blinds that let in light in the morning, so you can't get a good night's sleep. All of these things affect the user experience, but are not considered by the builder, by the architect. They're not even on they might be, the lighting might be on the drawing, but it's not the best way to approach a home, the design of a home. And that's what we are ultimately creating. And we're talking about function. For me, the product has to make money over time, but it won't make money over time unless it is the product it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be a home for everybody living in it. And if it doesn't feel like a home, then you're going to get higher churn rate. And if you're a property manager, you know that churn rate is the most awful thing to have to deal with, especially with the changes in the rental laws coming up. It's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And if you keep on having to change tenancies because people aren't happy and move on all the time, then you're much more likely to have problems with tenants. So the knock-on effect is huge. So when we talk about, you're talking about color and cushions, that's staging. It is important. Staging is what sells the product. But then imagine if you've staged it beautifully and a year later, you've got a stinking house with a smelly kitchen that's full of crap. You've got these lovely pictures that don't represent the product. It's like, that's overpromising and under-delivering. So this is what I'm having to deal with every day.
I've heard you share an example before where you've mentioned a £2,000 uplift in finished delivered, an additional £150 per month extra rent. Well, you can do the maths on that, can't you, to see the benefit?
Well, interestingly, one of I would call her a business partner, Michelle, who works with YPN magazine doing the training. She has quite a substantial portfolio of HMOs, commercial HMOs. And when I told her that an increase of £150 a month represented a 75% increase in profits, she said, no, that's not right, Julian. That's not right. It can't be 75% increase in profits. But I said, well, what percentage of your turnover is profit? What percentage of your turnover is profit? And it's amazing how many landlords I ask that question to, who look at me with a blank expression and say, well, I'm making that much. Well, so what percentage of your turnover is? And they don't know. Would you buy a business if you didn't know how profitable it was? Like, that's how much I'm going to have to spend. Those are my running costs. That's what I'm selling the product for. That's my profit. And you'll be amazed at how many people I speak to who don't know what that is. And when I ask them, well, what percentage of your profit is your letting agent taking? And they say, well, 12%. I go, no. That's the percentage of your turnover that they're taking. What percentage of your profit are they taking? And they go, and when we work it out, they're actually taking 80% of their profit, because their profit is only 15% of turnover and the agent's taking 12% of it. And they don't realize this. So back to the question, which was about, what was the original question? Because I kind of went off on a tangent. Go on. I know I'm on the right path.
Yeah, it was well, looking at big areas, the starting with the end in mind process. So the layout, the electric, schedule of works, and why that matters so much. Yeah, well, then again, we're talking about uplift, profit, 150 quid increase in profit. So I when I spoke to Michelle about this, her room was originally on at 550. We made it look nicer, did it the nicer design, and it then rented at 650. So that was went from 500 to 650. And that's a 75% increase in profit. And she's gone, no, that's not right. And when she looked at her numbers and she looked at her costs, her finance, her bills, all the other costs, she realized that she was making around about £200 per room. So her profit was £200. And then she'd gone and increased her profit by another £150, because anything over that is pure profit. So then she realized that just by making the rooms look nicer, increasing the rent, she was making a 75% increase in profit. And she thought, well, how's that going to affect the commercial value? So imagine if your rent's profit goes up by 75%. How's that going to affect the commercial value? Just on her 10 bedroom HMO, when she refinanced it in a nicer, presented better, with better, and this was in Cheshire. This is not in London. This is Cheshire. It was an increase of £92,000 in its value. She was able to pull out another 92. Now, I don't do things that way. I don't do commercial HMOs myself. But as far as I understand it, that's tax-free money, because it's a loan. So that's all I can say. And the only thing that did that was how it looked. It wasn't any other magic. She didn't do any kind of creative strategies or anything. She just made the rooms nicer, presented them better,
took better pictures. And this is what I was talking about, staging. That's what staging has helped. There's evidence to suggest that staging itself increases the value of a room or a property by 10%, something like that. Now, if your profit margin is only 15%, then an increase in 10% is huge.
For anyone listening then who's got an existing portfolio, where's the quickest return on redesign? Is it improving what they already own? Is it buying new assets?
Yeah, never buy new assets, because you've still got the old assets that are dragging the new ones down. First of all, you're going to have to go back to the old ones eventually. No, I mean, I've done a bit of research on this. The difference between spending money doing up existing assets compared to buying new ones, the difference in ROI is insane. I'm not brilliant with numbers, but let's say you have to spend, I was conscious of the fact that I rubbed my nose then, so I don't want to lie. Let's say you were to spend £1,000 upgrading a room, or £1,500 upgrading a room. The consequences of that could be that you don't have to wait as long to find a tenant. So it might take you a month or two to rent a room if it's not that nice. So that's that could be £1,000 right there. That pays for the work right there. Ignoring that, if you uplift, it depends on what profit you're making. So, if you're a leveraged landlord, it's unlikely you're making more than about 15% profit on turnover. And it's very likely that you can increase your profit on that room by at least 50% profit. It might not seem that much, but peace of mind is also something that comes as a consequence of that as well, because you find better tenants that want to look after the place better. And therefore, again, your property has got better longevity. Because if you've got tenants that abuse the place, you see lots of landlords complaining about the fact that tenants trashed a room. Well, when I look at the design of the room, it's normally a pretty low quality room that they've trashed. You don't really normally get high-end room, a nicely presented room where you've been a bit more discerning about who you let in, being trashed. So peace of mind to me is the big thing, not just, again, this is maybe another thing that maybe people don't quantify when they're investing. Are you getting peace of mind, or are you getting a headache? And what's that worth? And again, that's to me that you can only, peace of mind comes with a well-designed product.
So sticking with tenant type, should design differ when you're targeting tenants versus short stay guests? And why do many investors get this wrong?
Yes. 100%. There's a big difference between serviced accommodation, to me, big difference between serviced accommodation and, let's say a long-term let. And there is a difference between furnished and unfurnished accommodation as well. So just let's take HMOs and let's take serviced accommodation. And there are lots of different types. So I am very aware that, one shoe doesn't fit all. So this really does depend. And I get this quite a lot where people say, I want to appeal to contractors if I'm doing serviced accommodation. And I don't really think about my audience at all. I just know that they want en-suites if they're HMOs. I don't have rooms with en-suites. I've got one en-suite in my portfolio and the rest of the rooms are not en-suite, and I don't have any problems renting them out. But in terms of the experience, I mentioned that an HMO room has to fulfill many functions for the person living in it. So for an HMO, I think when you were asking me the question, you were thinking about more how it looks rather than how it works. For an HMO, it's more about how it works and how it looks. So for me, there's a great designer called Dieter Rams, who is my kind of guiding light when it comes to HMO design. And he set these 10 principles of good design that I follow as if they are immovable laws that cannot be, you can't go, well, what if I change it slightly? No, you can't. It's like somebody who knows what they're doing and has got a huge track record telling you this is what works. And those are the principles that I follow when I design an HMO. These are longevity, functionality, usability. Those are the principles behind the design. And it's very much a product. And one of the things that he says is good design is as little design as possible. That's one of his principles. And I think that's very true when it comes to HMO design. You don't want to over design it. You don't want to be obtrusive with the design. Somebody needs to feel comfortable the moment they move in. And the less fussy it is, the more functional it is, the better. So I'm a bit of a minimalism in that respect, but you've got to think about, so what is somebody going to need to do in this room? They're going to probably want to eat, sleep, watch TV, write emails, maybe have a mate round once in a while. They want to feel warm. It's got to feel cozy, but it's also got to be able to perform all these other things. Color is the last thing I think about, but if it does need any color, it's normally quite restrained. Any color that I would use would be in the communal spaces to make it, oh wow, when you walk in. But the rooms themselves, what if the tenant's got Laura Ashley bedding or, likes manga comics? That's what you're dealing with. Those are the different, and what if they have no taste whatsoever, and they're just bringing in duvets from Range and duvet covers from Range and they don't care. You don't want to make it so they feel uncomfortable. With serviced accommodation, let's just take holiday. Let's just take short breaks, or if you're going away for a quick break. I would say that a discerning customer, not somebody that's going to want to have a party there, but somebody that's going to have a nice breakaway, is going to be looking for an experience. It's like, I'll give you an example. I love when you see a nice Ferrari or a Lamborghini, you admire it. That's lovely. Would I want to own one? No. It's the same with, I think, serviced accommodation. If you're doing an experience, is your home wouldn't probably look like this. But that's not what somebody wants. They don't want to go from their home and go to a place that's not as nice or that's the same. I mean, you want something that's a bit more of an experience. And what I've noticed with serviced accommodation is the ones that are more, I'd use the word boutique to describe it. The more boutique the project, the higher the value. I don't mean like, a certain style. What I mean is it stands out by being unique. It's not done to a method. It's not like copy and paste Holiday Inn. It's, that really stands out from the page. And that's what you want to try and do if you're doing serviced accommodation. And again, because there's more and more, it is a competitive market space, serviced accommodation. And, not only is it competitive, but people give you a grade at the end of it. And so, again, I would say to everybody doing serviced accommodation is live in it for a week. So make it look nice, do it up, and then live in it for a week. Because you'll find lots of things that annoy you. How the hell do I use the bloody kettle? Where's the heating control? Blimey, why is the heating coming on at 4:00 in the morning? I can't find the key thing because it's dark and I can't press the, or the TV doesn't work. The Wi-Fi shit. All of those things will affect the experience and people will mark you down on it. My partner had a service let in Whitby, near Whitby. And she'd done it up years before. It wasn't the most amazing looking property, but when guests arrived, they had a little welcome basket and she made them feel welcome when they came in. And if you need anything, or she'd ask them, is anyone having a birthday? What's the reason for your stay? And if they were coming in, it was somebody's birthday, she'd leave a little birthday cake and whatever. And she would get constantly, the comments were, host made us feel really welcome. She had left us a lovely welcome basket. The products in the bathroom were wonderful. It wasn't the best property, but it was the best service. And so I think that's why it's called serviced accommodation, because it does rely on a level of service. So there's many things that can affect its value in serviced accommodation. It could be how it's run, how it's cleaned. That's a proper business there. Again, if you think I'm going to invest in a service let and I'm going to leave it to somebody else, how long is that going to last before somebody does it better? Or how long is it going to last before you get a complaint from somebody because it's not been done right? Or, is the person not been available on the weekend and there's been a leak or whatever it might be, and you get marked a 1 and that takes your grade point average down and then you're lost. I did another bit of research on Airbnb and it talks about superhosts and guest favorite. If you become Superhost, your profit margin goes up by 60%, according to research. So that relies on good quality product and service. And so that's all part of the design. With me, even with running with an HMO, the maintenance and the management are part of the design. They're part of the success of the design. And this is where I just really annoys when people just talk about leverage, because you kind of take yourself out of that situation and go, well, I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm going to just think assume it's going to be left by other people that are going to do a good job. And I hate that word.
So you teach this and have been teaching this for many years, Julian, and you speak at many property events. I'm sure many of our listeners will be familiar with you and will have met you and even learned from you. Tell us a little bit more about what listeners, can gain from perhaps some of your training sessions.
Okay. It depends what they're looking to achieve. So I'm assuming that most people that come to me for training do not want to be designers. They want their product to succeed. That's really what they want. I said that you don't know what you don't know. And so if I was to summarize what I try to do is I try to get people to know what they don't know, to be aware, to be design aware, and to be design led. So it's like Steve Jobs wasn't a designer. He was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur, but he was a design-led entrepreneur. And there's something called the Design Value Index. Now, if we've got a whole load of investors listening to this, there is something called the Design Value Index. And you might want to look up the performance of the Design Value Index, because I think it's an index-linked fund where that fund invests in design-led companies. And how well does that fund perform compared to companies that invest in non-design-led companies? And it outperforms non-design-led investments by 200% over a 10-year period. So the DVI index, if you look at the DVI index covers, I think, most of the major economies. So they've done their study on all the different stock markets and how their products, how their choices perform against non-design led companies in the SSA, what's it called? The American S&P, the UK markets, the Danish markets, and the numbers are always the same. It's 200% or above. They outperform non-design-led companies. And look it up yourself, Design Value Index. And these reports are done every 10 years. So this is a 10-year cycle. So that was another thing that prompted me to think about design a bit more, was the fact that the Design Value Index shows that design-led companies outperform their competitors by 200% plus. And so that's really what I do, is turn you from just a non-design thinker to a design thinker. And that's really all that you need to do, is to be more aware of what you're doing and to go at it. I mean, you've got to have different hats when you're in business. And I did say that when you're investing in an HMO or whatever, it's a business. It's not an investment. It's business. So as a business person, you do need to have different hats on. You do need to have a very cold investment mindset. Does it make profit? No. Yeah. Fine. How much does it make? How can I make this as profitable as possible? That's fine. You have to have an accountant's head. So you need to think about those, or use an accountant in my case, because I don't have an accountant's head. You need to have a designer head. You need to have a people skills head. So, because you're dealing with people all the time. So design, if you don't have that hat, I teach people how to have that hat.
And for anyone who just doesn't want to be hands-on, how hands-on can you be for them?
Well, I work as a designer as well. So one of the things that I was going to say, and I don't know whether you can ask me this later, was about, I do consultancy work and I work with clients who want me to design the product for them. So that works in several ways. I mean, we just spoke about, what if you're an existing landlord and you've got existing rooms? Well, I've just been working with a landlord purely over Zoom, where he showed me pictures of his rooms and his house, his corridor, his kitchen, living room, bedrooms. And I've basically just worked with him, not me just doing the work and then sending it to him, but we have consultations where I'm sitting down with him and we're working through the problems. I'm giving him the specifications. I'm giving him instructions on how to instruct his decorator, how to work with his builder, and, you know, I'm working with him like that. And that was 3 2-hour calls. And he's messaged me back saying, I didn't have time to photograph the rooms because the first person that walked through the door wanted the rooms. So that was that. That's the first thing. And then there's other investors that I've got who, I've one guy that I'm working with, one couple that I'm working with, who's now bringing, you know, their 4th property to me. He's an ex-banker who decided I'm getting out of that tower of insanity and going to invest in property. And he'll send me his architect's drawings. I then do the layout planning, the electrical layout, materials spec, and then help him hold his hand through the project. If the builder's got any questions, he fires them back to me. We're part of a WhatsApp group. And I just basically, I'm there as the design person in the team, because I've done so many refurbs. I've worked with contractors. Don't kid a kidder. You know, I can talk the language and I'm not afraid to say what I need to say with a builder, because that's what they tend to respect is, you know, if it's not right, you just tell them it's not right. And if they push back, okay, you know, don't be afraid of confrontation when you're dealing with a builder. And if, you know, that's just how it is. You know, sometimes I get a verbal bruising. I'm not too proud to, you know, have to deal with that. And so that's the kind of thing that I do with other clients. I've done got another guy that's bought a big, old, it's like a small hotel. He's turning that into a service let in Cumbria. We're going there next couple of weeks to go and have a look at that. So I'm hands on. The training is something that I love. I love to present. I just love it. And so I just talk at PIN meetings. I don't think I ever make anything from it, apart from maybe I might get somebody call me up a year later and say, oh, I saw you at PIN. I'm doing a project. And that's probably why I do it. But I work from home. Some people think I'm in a car. I'm not. I'm actually in my loft I work from home, work for myself. I don't have a huge circle of friends. I pretty much keep myself to myself. So I think when I go out into the world, I just like to just be the same. Standing up in a room full of people. And also, I remember when I was starting off my investment journey, this was just after the credit crunch, and things had been very tough. And somebody said, if you want to be good at something, make yourself the go-to person.
Very wise words. Yeah.
And I guess this is probably business advice. Now, how better to sell something and sell yourself than to do it in front of everybody? And why network? I mean, I used to DJ. I used to be a DJ, and that was because I didn't have enough money to go into these lovely big clubs and pay for drinks and everything else. I just didn't have that so I just thought, well, if I become a DJ, I can get in for free. I can get all the women and I don't have to pay entry. I get paid for it.
We'll have to do a podcast on that another day.
It's all about efficiency. Think smart. Work smart, not hard. Work smart, not hard. So, and I love it. I used to be terrified of public speaking. Terrified. Self-confidence. And I got over that because I realized that actually, if you can put yourself in front of the room, you're the authority. A
great example there of what we teach at WealthBuilders, you know, multiple pillars. IP is something that you develop over time with experience. And, as you say, growing your confidence, knowing that you've got value to share with others, and then understanding the value there, monetizing that as well, building those streams of income. And you've shared so much with us today, Julian. Thank you. It's been some really, really valuable insights. I'm going to ask you, final question. If you had to give let's say long-term investors one mindset shift that will help them protect the value of their portfolio, of their wealth over the next sort of 10 to 15 years, what do you think that might be?
You spoke about start with the end in mind, and I could probably go back to that. I would actually probably say, think of yourself as a custodian, not as an investor. The money is passing through you to the next person, and you are the custodian of that wealth. Think of yourself as the custodian.
I think those are wonderful words and a great bridge to my debrief with Kevin, which will follow this. Julian, thank you once again. And I'm sure our listeners will have got huge value from that. If anyone would like to connect with you, see what you're doing online, where's the best place for them to head?
Well, I have a website, which is www.iconliving.co.uk, where I have products and talks about my services. It's probably not the most up-to-date website. If anyone wants me to have a look at what they're doing, I'm happy to do a free. I always say to people, we'll have a chat first. So I'm happy to give people my time free if they want me to have a look at something for them. I would say that probably best not to just show me property that they've just seen on an estate agent, because then I'll just have loads of people coming to me. But if they put an offer in on something, maybe probably before they've even spent any money, they've put the offer in and it's been accepted. And they might start then thinking, oh, hell, what do I do now? Be a good point at which to come to me, and I'll either say, you're making a big mistake, or, yeah, this will work. And if they want that kind of eyes on, then come to me. And my email address is julian@iconliving.co.uk.
Fantastic. Well, I will share all the links in today's show notes. Julian, thank you for being a great guest today on Wealth Talk.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Christian.
Okay. Thanks to Julian for sharing everything there. And one thing that came up a lot was thinking about property as a product. So if it's designed nicely, it's well thought out, it's built to last many years, etc., that will be valuable to you as an investor, but also a better experience for your customer. So I like the way that he thinks about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The word product conjures up different images, doesn't it, really, about something static, something kind of monochrome. It just exists in a box. But I think the word that I liked, there were two words I thought that he used that to me were a good distinction, going back to my point about Kiyosaki earlier on. One is flow. So you need a good flow in the same way as whenever we start engaging with people building their wealth, Chris, one of the first actions we ask them to do is to take their wealth dynamic, which identifies which sort of asset are you likely to be in consistent flow with. So not something that goes against your grain, but something where instead of rowing against the tide, you're going with it. And so it is, I think, with property that I think you challenged him a little, didn't you, on a number of different ways of why is this important? He said, design is a flow. The electrical, obviously, being a flow. Business is a flow. And you want it to flow to the next generation in a way that they would get excited, or if not excited, at least willing to engage in something that they can see as well managed, well maintained, and with a long-term flow in mind. Almost begin with the end in mind, I think. And I think that's critical when it comes to wealth building and the different perspective when it comes to property, which is all too often you get what you get and you buy what you buy and you can't really influence it. You might influence the tenant type and you might do some things or thematic for you, how you like things to look. But the longevity is just as important. And he mentioned some developers in his local area where the properties had become virtually worthless because there was I'm not sure, I can't remember all the details of the triangle, but quick and dirty is not a good plan, is it?
That's right, yes. And yeah, maybe one of the other similarities, he talked about the builders and architects, kind of, I guess they're looking out for what's best for them. Of course, they've got some care for the client in there, but do you see any similarities with any other aspects of wealth there, Kevin?
Well, couldn't agree with you more on raising the point. So we know that traditional financial planning is fundamentally flawed and that most successful people build complexity in their life, often fueled by the very silos they've visited. They've stopped off and they've visited an accountant who looks backwards. They've talked to a financial advisor who's really, doing their best they can. But when you operate in a silo, you don't see the whole picture. And I think there's the myopia of that, the myopic approach that leads to challenges down the line. So, and we see that, don't we, as we have started to engage more proactively with our clients of the Family Wealth Fortress, this 360-degree plan, this holistic plan, this almost acting as a family wealth GP, diagnosing only what's in the best interest of the client, no conflicts, no commissions, nothing that gets in the way than doing what's best in a holistic way. And I'm proud of having created that, Chris, and I think that speaks a little bit like Julian was speaking, the way that he thinks about property and the way he teaches others. And no wonder YPN, who are a very upstanding organization, have chosen him as the logical partner to joint venture with in that regard. So, yeah, I enjoyed listening to him and enjoyed the previous conversation with him. And I hope many of our members and listeners reach out and see what he's all about.
Something that just cropped up, Kevin, one of our most downloaded and listened to podcasts right back at episode 2 or 3 was the 3Ds. Are you doing it yourself? Are you drifting? Work with others or be a dynamic? And in a way, that applies to so many things in wealth. And even here, isn't it? You can, learn a little bit, do it yourself. You can work with someone like Julian, have him guide you, or just kind of outsource it completely.
Yes, that's a good one. Go back to listen. I've forgotten that one. That is somewhere around episode 2, 3. I think it's the 4Ds actually, Chris, not 3Ds.
We expanded it, didn't we, from 3 to 4? Yes.
The DIYer, who most expensive words in wealth building, I think, DIY. You do it yourself, trial and error. It means you're not humble. You're not willing to be guided. And I think that's a fundamental flaw. So I look out for DIYers and step aside and let them pass by. And that's fine. The drifters, those who go around in circles, really in an eddy and a whirlpool of that just keeps them locked in there. They think they're going to do something. They may be open-minded to listening to a podcast or watching a video or whatever, but they're not really going to do anything. The delegators, those who think somebody else knows better, and I suppose that speaks a little to Julian's point about architects. And so often that delegation turns into application after a while, and you don't get the certainty that wealth is really created when you're involved in your own plan. So that's why we like the dynamics, which is the 4th one, that you're willing both to be willing to help others, but willing to be helped. And I think that's what we're looking for, that open-mindedness when we reach out to people. And was the one group of people I just don't have any tolerance for, Chris, myself, are the arrogant ones, the ones who think they know everything, want to brag about everything, but in the end, they are making many, many mistakes that will be compounded over time. And again, they're the 2 groups I sidestep, the DIYers and the arrogance. And there are plenty of people in between that we're delighted to work with, delighted to help. And anyway, if they're DIYs, they can listen to the podcast and follow up on any of the actions, although it's a very slow process. How many episodes have we done now? 300 and something?
Yeah, 317 or so, yeah.
All right, well, if you imagine you were learning your wealth by listening to 317 podcasts, you'd just be going round in a circle, wouldn't you? Because we'll go from one idea to the next expert, to the next. And it's not really a comprehensive, well-designed plan. It's just what comes up, when it's appropriate. We meet somebody like Julian, and we think, well, they're good and definitely worth an airing. But that doesn't mean we think that at this point, 5 years down the line, you should be looking at this 5 years later. Just we didn't know Julian 5 years ago.
So we hope you learned something from today's episode. And if you've got a portfolio property or you're looking to buy even your first property, why not take on board some of the things that Julian mentioned and suggested today? And that might just increase profits and help you in your wealth building journey. So if you enjoyed today's episode, do share it with a friend. And Kevin, you and I will be back same time, same place in 2 weeks.
We will. And until then, my friend, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the WealthBuilders membership site to help you create, build, and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.